Some people have scars on the outside. Some people wear their scars on the inside. But every scar has a story. Every loss carries love, and every survivor holds a strength they may not realize they possess. Welcome to SOS Stories of Survivors. Welcome back to SOS Stories of Survivors. I'm your host, Serena Dansker, and I am so happy to introduce today's guest, Julie Blitzer. She's the founder of Authentic Matters. Julie is a grief recovery method specialist. She's an end-of-life doula, a funeral celebrant, a Hoffman Process graduate leader, a movement guy, and a published author. Her work is centered around helping people walk through grief, face life's biggest transitions, and reconnect with themselves in a deeper and more honest way. Julie is so amazing, and her guiding intention is beautifully captured by the Ram Dass quote, "We're all just walking each other home," which she shares on her website as part of her calling. And today we're going to talk about grief, death, healing, the body, writing, and how facing the end of life can actually teach us how to live more fully. Julie, welcome to SOS Stories of Survivors. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Serena. It's an honor to be here.
Oh my gosh. Before we get into all of the amazing things you do, I would just like for our listeners to get to know you and who you are at your core.
Sure. Well, I love that question. And I will preface this by saying sometimes I will close my eyes probably before I answer a question just to tap into what's feeling really true. I'm not, ignoring you by any means. So I would say at my core, I am a light being who's looking to learn and play as much as possible.
I love that. I think we all have our inner light, right?
Absolutely.
And we try and let them shine.
100%. And I guess that idea of connecting the light with childlike qualities, tapping into that inner child is like a real homecoming.
That's so beautiful. I know your work is called Authentic Matters, which I got to tell you is such a beautiful, beautiful name. And what does authentic mean to you now? And what did it mean to you earlier in your life?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely evolved and evolving, I think. I love the play on words, actually, that authentic matters is a noun and a verb. I do like to play with words. And so just on the base level, it was fun. And then to think about authenticity, getting to connection with that light part of us. So I guess for me, it's about trying to get soul-to-soul interactions and try to strip away some of the masks that we wear, so to speak, different roles that we show up in. And they're not negative. Like, we have to play different parts to get through the world. It's just refreshing to sometimes let them fall away and I think authenticity is more about feeling it, that we don't have to, we know it when we spot it. So usually I think it manifests in connection. But the matters part is fun too, because we are talking about different subject matters that are important, and then to the degree that we get into what's at the core of them, that's where the substance of mattering.
I love that, and I'm a firm believer in perfection isn't what it's all about. It's about authenticity. And I've, of course, everything I've gone through in my life has been a journey and a healing process. And it took me a long time to recognize that and to tap into my authentic self. So I can totally relate to what you're saying and the matters there.
Absolutely. In terms of my evolving process with that word, and sometimes I'll be really transparent here, to use that language, authentic matters, is I don't want to be a fraud and say, oh, here I am totally authentic, because it's still happening all the time. And I will say that through different trainings, different life experiences, even connecting with learning your body more, and it's all part of getting to real comfort with, who I am in this physical body.
It's a journey, right?
100%.
It's a journey. There's no right or wrong way to do things. I mean, maybe there are, but
oh no,
I'm
no
discovering it as I go.
Exactly. I would say there's the right and wrong is, in terms of it, is in accordance or in alignment with your soul.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. Yeah.
I mean, the external measures is where we often get caught up. It's like, oh, is this what, is expected of me, whether it's from family members, from society, or, your educational background, whatever. But oftentimes, if that's in alignment with what your soul wants, like 100%, that's such a validating feeling.
It's so true. It's what I've realized. It's like, if my heart is in the right place and what I'm doing, it's coming from a place of love and a place of caring. So I go with it. I just try and trust my gut.
Yes, I will. I'm like thinking about my mom here, referencing her idea that I would be very frustrated with some of the wisdom that she would share when I was growing up, because she was a lot out of the box, so to speak, in her spirituality, and well before people were into and spirituality that's become more mainstream. And so I really rejected a lot of these kinds of concepts. So it's very ironic that here I am in this work. But she would say, listen to that inner voice. And it sounded woo-woo to me. So I didn't want anything to do. But she was so right. It's that gut check. And there's another way to describe it is like a lightness versus heaviness when decision making. Like, there's usually a lighter sensation that comes with, oh, I'm in the right direction, or I'm going on the right path. Heaviness it's very simplistically stated, but it could be an indication, it's not aligned.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes we fight that feeling tooth and nail because we think that's really what we're supposed to do. And the dread that comes every morning when we get out of bed should be the indication that maybe, just maybe, we're not on the right path.
Well, that word think, I think, is the indicator when we're too much in intellect or in our head and not coming from the heart, the conflict starts to come in. But it takes work to be able to consult with heart first. I'm not saying it's easy.
No, definitely not. I mean, I know on your website you have a fun little question there on what do you want to be when you grow up? And I know that it took you a long time to kind of figure out how to answer that question. Do you want to tell our listeners about that?
Sure. Sometimes peeling back and getting as simple as possible is where the gut check is. And so it's like, I want to help people feel better. I mean, that's really it. I think I have we all do actually. We all want to be helpers in some way. Just from my family of origin, I think my role that I took on was to kind of be a stabilizer when there was some, I'll say dis-ease or just difficulty with some mental illness in the family. So that's like an innate quality. And when I finally leaned into it as, this is something I'd like to do more broadly, then it's, say, the law of attraction, but things started to show up on my path that made sense, and it felt in alignment. And it started with this practice called journey dance, and that's the movement practice that I was trained in, And it made sense for so many reasons because my form of expression as a little girl was through dance. I was super quiet, like almost mute. But you put me on a dance floor and I was quite vibrant. So it's funny how sometimes just reconnecting with that little person inside, who's always there, I would argue, can be a real guide.
I love that because we were talking before. My mom had just recently passed, and my mom loved to dance too, and she would do all sorts of dance moves. She would be Latin dances, salsa, merengue, the cha-cha. It was just who she was, and I had watched some old videos of her as a child, and she would just take command of the room. So
Yeah.
I totally get that. Of course, me, who has 2 left feet, I would just be in awe.
Totally. Well, it's funny that whole idea of the word dance can be intimidating for people. I'm like, oh, I have no rhythm or I can't find the beat. And I have found with this practice, calling it movement has been a little bit more inviting or available to people. And everybody can move to some degree, even if you're sitting down. I know a lot of seniors will do movement from a chair. And I don't know, people find that there's a release. And that practice for me is all about energy shifting in a very visceral way. And once things are flowing in the system, I feel like new pathways open up and I feel like ideas flow in or downloads come, like interesting messages that might not have been available if we're in the same, I don't want to say stuck energy, but static.
Was there something going on in your life when you were going through this whole thing that triggered it? Yeah.
Becoming a mom, I think sooner than expected, to be honest, was the catalyst, and realized, I wanted to expand a little bit more, connect with other people. So it was partly a little getaway from, being in full mom mode. But then I realized, I was like, I want to be able to share this with other people. The energy was so good. Wow. And when I said, the journey dance practice was really the catalyst for, grief work and other things, it was one particular training of the journey dance practice. I just had this thought, I feel so alive. I want more of this. And that is truly, there's another impetus for going down the grief work path. But I said, I don't know why, but it just occurred to me, if I want to feel more alive, I think I need to look at death. Not in a morbid way, but as a tool to make sure that I'm experiencing as much aliveness while I can before it's gone.
It's true. I think the more I've gone through grief, through people who have passed, the more I appreciate life.
Oh, yeah.
And it's crazy. I hear people complain they're all getting older, and I'm just thinking, you know what? We have one shot at this, and not everybody gets to live to be 100. So every day is a gift, and I'm looking to just make the best of it, and I can totally, relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it surprised me. I mean, that's something I think the movement allowed for. I didn't have this conscious thought before, if I want to feel more alive, look at death while I'm in the throes of young motherhood. So I guess that it's a prompt or an invitation to people, maybe it's not always through the rational mind where we're going to get the clear answers. It can be just from actually unplugging from the mind.
Yes,
and it doesn't have to be,
being in the now, right?
Yes,
being present.
100%. So that was, the interesting launch pad.
Was there a moment or a loss or a personal turning point that pulled you toward the grief work and the end of life work as well?
Yes. It was pretty clear. So I was in a relationship with someone as a coaching client, personal coaching. And our work really pivoted when she learned her dad was dying, and it was rather sudden, and she really needed to somewhat process but also prepare to support him and as he transitioned. I wasn't equipped with those skills, so it made me curious. Like, loss is ubiquitous. We're all going to experience some kind of loss, and it will even show up when people are focusing on moving forward in a coaching situation. So I thought this makes sense to have that background, some toolkit that can deal with loss, even though most of the time in coaching, people want to focus on moving forward. So that was the impetus. And we, without training and just being supportive and thinking about and responding to what she needed, we were able to come up with ideas about how to preserve his legacy. So that was really important to her. And actually, I'm just realizing, like, that probably planted the seed that with doula work, legacy projects are very important to me. It's kind of something I like to focus on.
So it's all related.
Yeah, I'm just realizing that in this moment.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
Beautiful. It is. It's so beautiful. I mean, I find just from my own experiences that with my mother, she went through a period of being ill, and even though she was still here, I think I was still grieving her. I started to grieve her while she was alive, and I didn't expect that, but in some ways, I was just grieving the relationship that was going to be coming to an end.
Makes so much sense. I mean, there's definitely a piece of grief called anticipatory grief, and so if people know, there's a terminal illness and it's coming down the pike. There's also, with so much dementia and Alzheimer's, people experience almost two losses of the same person when they lose their connection to them cognitively, and they may not be able to recall memories or, especially in the short term, recognize someone. So in the grief work that I do in a situation like that, we would actually process two losses or two relationships, really, because you are in relationship with this person for probably decades in one manner, and it certainly shifts greatly.
Are you comfortable sharing your own experience with grief and how that puts you on this path on how you support others?
Absolutely. So I have one sibling. She died 4 years ago.
Sorry.
Thank you. And the irony is that I had done my training in the grief recovery method years before. She was terminal, and it wasn't, on that path at all. So it's so interesting how the so-called dots line up on my big grid, that I went through that training, and it prepared me really because it was, my catalyst was to work with other people around loss. And of course I was served in that amazing training and was able to bring those tools to my parents at the time and myself with her passing. And subsequently, a little over a year ago, my mom passed. And so I do feel like it's a gift. I mean, that I was able to have this background prior to these losses, which were completely unanticipated because my mom died pretty suddenly as well. And being able to work with clients prior and hearing different stories, understanding the different layers of grief through their stories, so it happened accidentally, to be honest, but in the realm of I want to serve other people, it ended up serving me, and then really serving me years down the line.
Isn't that funny how the universe works? I tell you, I get blown away sometimes by where my journey has taken me, and every day I feel so blessed and lucky that I get to meet people and talk to people like you, and learn about how your experiences are. And I'd love to just explore. I know, most people, when they think about grief, they think about death, and that's the kind of loss. But there are so many other types of loss as well. Totally. You want to maybe talk about how those losses can also be processed?
For sure. And I'll just say to that point about, finding our way along our path, I love serendipity in terms of when it is really manifesting and we see connections between, this event in my life had a direct correlation to this one. And sometimes it is so murky and there's no making sense of it. So I hold space for that too. But it's quite beautiful when it lines up. So, yes, loss is so broad. Grief gets aligned with bereavement and death, but we certainly grieve so many different kinds of losses. And I'll actually just use the definitions from the grief recovery method because I think they just explain it so well. There's 2 definitions we use in that program, and the first is quite simply, grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss. And I do love those 2 adjectives because it just strips away the fact that there is nothing broken, there's nothing abnormal. It is all almost expected, but society may not, or culture, paint it that way.
Yeah, it's so funny because, I think of loss and it can come in the form of divorce. It can be loss of a job, the breakup, of a boyfriend, girlfriend, just being...
Well, health and even finances. And the other definition that we used, and I think it's the conflicting feelings that are caused by a change in or end of a familiar pattern of behavior. So it's a lot of words, a lot more than the first definition. But that last phrase, a change in a familiar pattern of behavior, that can apply to countless situations.
Empty nesting?
Yes, it's big transitions.
Big, right?
And I will say GRM for short, the grief recovery method, explains that there's 40 significant losses. I can't name them all in this moment, but okay. So there's a host of types of loss that produce grieving feelings. And I do like that specificity that grief is about conflicting feelings coexisting, because our brain has a hard time with negotiating very different feeling states. And so, of course, it gets murky and confusing and you feel lost.
You do. I mean, I will tell you that at times I feel like I have ADD or ADHD. I'm not sure which, but I can't focus for long periods of time. And you go from one thing to the other and you forget what you were doing. And I'm told that's all normal.
Absolutely. The book, The Grieving Brain, I believe, I'm forgetting the author right now, but I think she talks about how focus, concentration, all these cognitive abilities can totally be diminished, if not stripped away, in the grieving experience. And they come back online. This isn't permanent. But another idea of GRM is that, there's a myth that time is going to heal or make grief go away. I roll my eyes, so it's just not a valid phrase. And the understanding we say is you have to do something in that time. So we are proponents of being actionable with very specific things that we do in the program. So time absolutely is a healing agent, but it doesn't work unilaterally, and it's not a solve. So that asks a lot of grievers, to get to be able to concentrate and have some focus to do some work around it and introspection.
You talk about on your site about grief as a full body a full spirit experience. What does that mean to you?
Well, and I think about kind of 4 attributes of a person or a human. We have our intellect, we have our emotional body, physical body, of course, and our spirit body. And I think grief will work its way into all those pieces. You could have shortness of breath. I mean, sometimes grievers might say, oh, it's hard to breathe. That's very real. Obviously, the emotional state, you have these conflicting feelings happening. And just for an example, like the conflicting could be if someone went through long periods of healthcare and the loved ones remaining might be like, there's a little relief, if I'm being honest, Of course, deep sadness is right alongside that. Spiritually, someone could just be really questioning a lot. How can the universe make this happen? There's so much suffering. And so all of that is affected, and nothing gets, everything's affected.
It's so true. When my son passed, I felt like in my soul, in my core, I felt like I was sucker punched,
Mm-hmm.
And that it was a very different feeling than when my mother passed. I felt just a loss, and it's my mom was the normal course of events. My son was not, and maybe that describes it. But it was still difficult to come to those terms and
Absolutely
recognize that.
Well, the other idea is a myth, that grief gets, X amount of time before we should, be done with it or at least be more okay, so to speak. It's well over a year that the brain, the neural pathways can really understand that change in behavior, meaning this person was in my life physically, it just neurologically, that it takes a long time for these new neural pathways to understand that that's not reality, never mind the emotional state. So a minimum a year, I think, is safe. And then depending on the type of loss, it can, of course, be so much more and intense.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when I was grieving, we made some pretty big financial decisions that, looking back, probably wasn't the right thing to do at that time. But even, after a year or so, people may carry still unresolved grief, even if they seem fine on the outside. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So we find that unresolved grief is often kind of linked to the more painful quality of grief, because grief, in my view and a lot of people's, is it's not all pain and suffering. There's definitely an association with that, but it actually is an expression of love. So the unresolved pieces are what can help or contribute to someone staying more stuck and not being able to experience life more fully. And in GRM, we really work to help people get through those parts. A lot of it is about delivering communications that may have not been said, may not have been heard when the person was around. Or again, if it's like just in a strange relationship or another type of loss, that getting it off of our heart and definitely out of that looping thinking is where we get more repair. So that unresolved piece is very significant. And I don't know, I think our culture, we just think we can push through it, but it catches up with us at some point.
It does. It absolutely does. And, I remember someone was going through some grief and they're like, when do you get better? When does it? And I'm like, it doesn't go away. You just learn to live with it.
The other piece about the unresolved grief and a quality that I think it manifests is, I'll call it like living in liminal space, sort of one foot feeling somewhat grounded. I'm here, I'm functioning in the world. Yet another foot is in this, and it almost might feel like someone's walking in a cloud-like state. And that liminalness is murky and confusing and feels unrooted.
Yeah.
And so that's a real straddle exercise that someone is doing. And that can exist for a very long time.
I was talking with a woman who recently lost her husband, and she has, 3 daughters and one's younger. And, she struggles a lot because she's wondering if she will ever feel joy again. It's so hard. And, it's, they may even feel guilty about wanting to feel joy. What do you say to that?
Well, my first instinct, honestly, is if I'm picturing this person, I would ask them to maybe just hold their heart if it wasn't too uncomfortable, and in a way, just to actually feel the heartbeat, or even if it's more appealing or approachable, to find the pulse on the wrist or something. And there you are, you're alive, and it's a starting point. You're not broken, and then extending compassion. I think the phrase "my heart goes out to you" is so apt, and I try to use that in expressing condolences more and more, because I think it might be more assisting to someone. We're sort of trained culturally to, of course, say "I'm sorry," and that is meaningful. But to know that there's this heart connection is a starting point. And to remind them, there's nothing to fix, but there's life to experience.
Yeah.
And I guess to help them believe that they deserve to experience that life. And it takes certainly time and steps, but that withholding, well, here's a new idea I'm learning, that our ancestors, people that have passed, they don't want us to suffer.
No, they don't.
And so it's almost a disservice, not only to ourselves, of course, but even to the lineage that we come from, to not express ourselves fully.
Yeah, I think that I think it's, when you're going through that healing process, it's that heaviness that weighs you down. And you want so much to laugh again about the silly stuff. And when you first find that you are laughing or you smile, it almost is like, wait a second, this, hello, my old friend, and then you feel guilty a little bit about that. But I think, like anything, over time, you become more comfortable with feeling those feelings.
And I think self-compassion is a huge piece of all of this. And with that, very specifically, giving yourself permission that, and I mean, this is more rational. It's hard for someone in grief to kind of pull all these ideas at the same time. But guilt is actually a useless emotion.
Yes, it's true.
And so just cognitively, if someone could say, there's really no practicality here.
You're so smart.
I might as well go be self-compassionate then, because that's, even if it's hard for people to do that, which I'd say in our culture is generally, it's a lot more effective than wallowing in grief. In guilt. In guilt.
Well, it's true. And it's so funny. Last year for Lent, I gave up guilt.
Oh,
and
I
decided, I said, it doesn't serve me. There's no reason I need to feel guilty about things that I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm putting out my best. I'm doing everything from my heart. So guilt has no room in my world. And I'm not always going to do things right, and I will make mistakes, but it's a journey, and it's part of the learning process. So I totally sign on to that.
Well, I'm just thinking, too, going back to the idea of like what's in alignment with our core and what feels true. I'd say for a little while, guilt might be in alignment for a grieving person, an intensely grieving person. But that should dissipate if they're willing to engage in life again. But there's sometimes a subconscious belief that they cannot. So that has to be contended with, I'd say.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the difference between the grief recovery method and traditional therapy. Can you talk a little about that? Yeah.
Well, first, GRM is a evidence-based program, one of the only ones in the grief space. And I will say, I'm skeptical of a lot of kind of self-growth, self-development programs because there's some great quality out there and some not so great quality. And so I brought that skeptic eye to the program at first, but I was so pleased, just really overwhelmed that it truly is effective. And so the way it works, it's very structured. Unlike therapy can be a little bit more, ongoing. Clients know that they are in it for 7 sessions, and we usually meet like an hour and 15 minutes or so. And there's a handbook that we use to guide our sessions, and there's also written assignments. So as I said before, we're putting accountability on our clients to show up to their grief and put in some real work. And so generally speaking, it would be for someone maybe at least 6 months out from them experiencing a loss. But so with each session, we have guided assignments there, so they have homework in between. And I model all of the exercises that they do before they'll have it as homework. And I think that's unique too, because they're hearing my story, they're hearing my experience with that work before they engage in it, and it builds connection. And so it's not just them kind of in the spotlight. And then one thing they'll do is look at their life just from a loss perspective. So it sounds very heavy, and it can be, but people can rise to the occasion, and they actually end up noticing, making observations and seeing trends. And so it helps illuminate how they show up to grief from history.
What does it actually help people do with their grief?
I would say, all right, so the other piece is the upshot is to get what we call complete with a relationship. And so when a person has more completeness with the relationship, you don't have that unresolved heaviness. So that word, actually, the heaviness, I will say, generally speaking, my clients come away after the 7 sessions and I feel lighter. And what has happened is that they change their relationship to the grief. It's not laden in pain. Still there, never going to deny that. And of course, we can't take away grief completely. No. But the idea is to change the relationship to it by getting complete.
What would you say to someone who is afraid that if they really start crying, that they'll never stop?
The crying. I'm just laughing because tears, well, one, I think physiologically, they have so much benefit. They release these good hormones. So in that way alone, they're a good thing.
Yeah.
But of course, if someone is self-conscious about crying, this idea, so in my hospice volunteer training, I learned this quote, I'm going to paraphrase. Basically, the idea is tears happen because our soul has been touched in some way, and therefore it's our soul leaking from our eyes. So that comes from, Barbara Carnes is an amazing grief and death and dying educator. She was a hospice nurse. She's still with us in the plan, but she's retired. And she wished she could give attribution. She heard this among like a staff person or someone. So some hospice nurse that she does not know who it was relayed that, and it stuck with me from that training years ago. And I just think it's accurate. Tears, because they happen, in happy, joyous times as well, right? And
Right.
that's our soul being activated.
I love that.
So I
love
think
that.
it's a truth teller of any. So I would hope that gives people more permission to cry.
I think so. And do you think there's a cost for not grieving?
Yeah, I think we alluded to a little bit before saying, well, there's self-sacrifice,
Right.
because you're not totally living. Then there's the physical, like when that's saying we have issues in our tissues, like stuck emotion is definitely going to land somewhere in the body. And at a cellular level, it keeps manifesting, and you could have true disease. So that's a real physical manifestation of not grieving. And then I think the cost is not allowing oneself to live fully. And that doesn't mean living fully is not just joy. It's the full spectrum of the human experience, and allowing your soul to be touched.
Yeah, and I think that, that just like trauma or anything, if you don't sit with those emotions, they're still going to be there if you don't, try and heal them.
Yeah, I mean, my own experience being someone for most of my young life and early adulthood, just stuffed emotion, wanted nothing to do with it. It was inconvenient. And so it was I would say like a dam, and it got backed up. And to be honest, I think motherhood was that lever that opened up and said, emotion has to get out.
Yeah, it does.
Unexpectedly. So, and so that's the cost, that it could happen in this deluge.
Yeah.
And it can feel like an avalanche.
It's true. You're also an end-of-life doula. For our listeners that don't know what that is or what that means, can you talk about that?
Sure. So some people might be more familiar with like a birth doula. It's usually the anchor, and that's someone that might assist nurses or a midwife with the birthing process. And end-of-life doula does the same thing. It's non-medical support to a dying person or their family members or loved ones. And that can take many forms. It can be just a confidant. Sometimes people going at the end of life often go through like a life review. And, their staff, nursing staff might not be the people that are going to hear that.
Right.
It can just being a source of comfort, and somehow that shows up, with music. I personally love children's books as a source of comfort, and especially if someone can't speak, the sense of hearing is the last to go. So hearing, stories is always beautiful.
I love that.
It can take the form of helping with anxiety around death, and leading people through visualizations can be very powerful. The imagination is so active. And a lot of times it's supporting family members and educating them about what the dying process looks like, what to look out for, how they can support each other. And honestly, what's coming to me now is to create an energetic space that is supportive for the dying person, because family, we know, is complicated, and people take on their different roles and can be combative or challenging to one another in the dying person's space, and that is just not the way that helps a transition.
Yeah, I find that sometimes we as a culture, we struggle to talk about death. And I don't know why we avoid talking about it so much. But can you talk about, what happens when a family actually is willing to talk about or have an honest conversation about what happens during the dying, but, before the very end, of course.
Yeah. Well, I think one big factor contributing to why we might not be so comfortable, it's become more medicalized in our society. I mean, some people are bringing death back more into the home, and hospice can definitely help with that process, which is great if people are open to it. But having some conversations, I think, takes fear away.
Yes.
Anytime we're educated about something that's foreign and new, it takes the mystery away. And with less fear and unknowns in the mix, you can often feel there's like a little bit more relaxation in the system. It's like, even on an individual basis, but then that like a little space has been given. So, and then hopefully people can talk about or getting to the wishes. What does this person really desire for a memorial experience, or what do they want to be buried? Do they want to be cremated? Like, hopefully those conversations happen well before someone's really near the end. But to develop some sort of comfort around it it really needs to happen long before someone's in that critical care situation. And so as a doula as well, I offer workshops, and it's to have conversations. And one way we approach it, or I think about it, is like, talk about this idea of Swedish death cleansing. And that's basically purging your home of the things that loved ones left behind probably don't want. And it's burdensome to have to deal with that cleaning out. And so to just start with at a material level, like what's sacred, who wants this, who wants nothing to do with that, it can be a nice entry point. It can happen before someone's ill, or, and I like to think about bucket lists as an entry point too. Like before if broaching death is so difficult, it's like, well, what would you want to do or see, experience before your time is up?
That's fascinating. Like I think it makes me think about what if you knew in advance that your end was near, what would you stop caring so much about, or what would you want to focus on?
Yeah, priorities would start to shift most likely. So that those are just really good entry points. Like I said, well before someone is experiencing dying process. Maybe even just talking about songs, poems, other memorials that they've witnessed that really spoke to them, and then it's just easing into, because as a doula, meeting people's wishes, knowing what they are, documenting them for how they want to be remembered is so important. And it also, that's a big relief for family members, because on top of missing them, grieving them, they have angst, like, oh, am I getting it right? Is this what they would have wanted? Or so I say, let's take all of that uncertainty off the table. And that is a great way to get to the conversation.
That's true. Now, you're also a funeral celebrant. What is that? And tell me about that role.
Yeah. So funeral celebrant is a person that basically officiates a funeral or a memorial service. It's not a clergy member. And now that more than 60% of bodies are cremated instead of buried, the traditions are changing. There's new needs, and a lot of more people are not affiliated necessarily with a congregation. So we need other people to fill that space. And a celebrant really focuses on making that experience as personal as possible. So help working with the family to create ritual, make sure that the essence of the person is really honored, being creative with what kind of memorial it is.
Can you talk about like the legacy projects that you referred to a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So, well, the one that leaps to mind is there was a chef that I was with, and she had ALS, and she wanted to preserve her recipes for her daughter. And so her wish was to create this cookbook. And we worked close to a year, and she was able to be involved with the whole process, and recording stories that went along with those recipes.
Oh.
And she, over time, with ALS, lost the ability to speak, but she had this amazing technology that she could look at a screen with her eyeballs and type with the technology of the eyeballs meeting. It was so incredible. So she got to be a part of all of the creation of it. She wasn't around to see the final hard copy, but that was a takeaway at her celebration of life. So people have her recipes, have her stories, and that really met. You know what? It gave her purpose when she was losing all these faculties.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. I mean, what do you say to someone who may come to you and say, I don't know how to say goodbye?
That's that word is super hard.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't launch into having to say goodbye right away. It's more, what do you love about them? What are they to you? And what will you miss? What are the stories that are sacred? And I mean, our brains are wired for connection, but stories in particular. So I think those are the real pathways. And if there's something tangible that you, through creation, is a beautiful way to help. Instead of having to say the words, it's producing something. And that could be a playlist. It could be an album. And people, making a shadow box of special material, objects, and collecting stories in some way. And look, this is a big ask. The thing people struggle with is having time in our society, right? So it's asking people to maybe really be preemptive about legacy work. And I don't know if it's during a holiday visit, you can say, oh, can we go into that box? And you just kind of pull out scraps of things that are meaningful, and maybe try to make it a habit over time, and so that it's done piecemeal.
Right.
And then it's not so overwhelming in the moment.
That's beautiful. I think that one of the things that I did with my mom is we would go through all the old photos, and I put together a scrapbook, and beautiful. I didn't know who half the people were, and quite honestly, I think she forgot who half the people were too. But that's okay, because it was just something we did together.
Totally.
And it's really, it's wonderful. And I know we talked a little bit about the journey dance that you do, but you're also a published author, and you wrote Seaweed Sentiment and other haiku from the heart. Talk about that and what inspired that?
Oh yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I organized what I called women's group workshops or gatherings for many years, and it would just be people that wanted to explore things to help in self-growth, a variety of topics we explored. And a friend came in, and her topic was writing haiku. It was a practice she did basically daily, and she would take photographs and produce a haiku poem.
Wow.
And haiku, for folks that don't know, is the most accessible poetry that I know. It's just 17 syllables, so 5 in the first line, 5 in the last line, and 7 in the middle. But it's challenging to work with too, because it forces you to really consolidate a thought into just 17 syllables. And I took it on as I love playing with words, and I remember as a young girl, haiku, when it was introduced in like 3rd or 4th grade, I really resonated with it, and so I played with that practice, and it developed on my daily dog walks with my little terrier, and snapping photos of beautiful sights. And I found that it was fun, because sometimes it would be very playful topics, help me deal with, I remember one about garbage bags being stuck in the hallway. No one was taking them out to the garage. And it's like, instead of being frustrated with my family members, I wrote a haiku about it. And it's like, okay,
that's brilliant.
Yes. So it was another way to process frustration. And then sometimes there's bigger themes about life experience that come out. And so that process, well, I think being able to create something every day is really satisfying for me. And Tim Ferriss, the great podcaster, he has this little line, make before you manage. And that just is like, we do so much managing in our life with this cultural lifestyle we have. So if you make something, and it can be so minute, I put out playlists a lot. That idea, I think, is easy. You can just 3 songs together. It's like, oh, I made something that was meaningful to me. It allows the managing part to feel a little more, I don't know, almost manageable, because you've done something that is more from the heart, soul space.
I totally agree that it's the little things. You just, one step at a time, right? And you put it together. Excuse me. You're also a Hoffman Process graduate leader. Tell us what that is.
Sure, we're glad to. So that's on a volunteer basis, but I've been doing it for about 5 years now. The Hoffman Process is an amazing program, and it basically focuses on people looking at their patterns and helping people develop tools and practices so that they're operating more from authentic place than a patterned place, because those two things often are not the same by any means. And Hoffman has 2 locations. There's actually more than 2, but the main ones are in California, and the other ones happens to be in Connecticut. And when I completed this program in 2021, and they encourage us to maybe join a graduate group in our area to be able to work in community with people who have also done the program, to work with the tools and practices, because without practice, it kind of gets latent. But there wasn't one in Connecticut. So I said, let me try. We meet monthly, and I guide our group in with modules that help us work on our patterns. And it just reinforces a lot of the work that I do, particularly the grief work, doula work, and helps me tap into that heart-centered space. I can't say enough about Hoffman. It really, when I describe like those 4 aspects of humans, it comes from Hoffman work. And so the other piece, of course, is that it builds our community in this common language that we have. And so we can just connect at that soul-to-soul authentic level pretty quickly without having known one another.
That's amazing. I like to do a quick lightning round with you where you answer the one question, you answer with one word or one sentence or whatever comes naturally to you. What's one word you associate with grief?
I have to say love. And not in a, I don't know, reductionist way. The more you grieve, perhaps it's probably more love that was
right.
there.
Isn't grief love with no place to go?
Yeah,
right?
100%.
How about one word you associate with healing?
Ease.
How about one thing people should say to someone who is grieving?
I think what I said earlier, my heart is with you.
What's one small ritual that can bring comfort after a loss?
I'd say the go-to is lighting a candle with intention.
I love that. I do.
It's simple.
What's one thing death has taught you about life?
I'll say that everything's energy, and we have the capacity to cultivate different types of energy.
How about what's one word you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
I guess nurture. And nurture yourself, nurture other people, nurture
Yeah.
the world.
Oh, I love that. I love this conversation. You are such a beautiful soul, and I'm so grateful that we could talk about grief. It's a heavy topic, but it's so important because it's really part of life.
Absolutely.
And
Can't escape it.
yes, and so I usually close out every one of my shows with a poem from my son Scott.
Beautiful.
And this one it's called In Exile. And he writes, I haven't written something for a while, but I've been treating my life in exile. I disregard my deepest desires to achieve this role that has already expired. I crave for attention, is what I tell myself, to conclude my actions for these acts. But honestly, that reasoning's pretty whack. I love myself, and I know my own attention is all I need. That is true. It is the care for others that I lack, and that leaves my head askew. Death is a concept so hard to conceptualize, but I don't know why we make it so monetized. Funerals are for those to let go of the past, but we're living in a future, so why go back and make those memories last? People come and go, and don't get me wrong, I care about others, but it is the selfish nature of all human beings that makes me wonder if it all goes into the gutter. I don't see the point why I would keep open up to others just for them to tell their mothers of my primal nature, just creating bad behavior and non-confirming anger that brings me to quaver and return back to my chamber. He had some heavy thoughts as a 15-year-old. And
Wow, that was at 15.
it was crazy.
Wow.
That's
That's powerful.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for you, Julie. And to our listeners today, if this conversation touched something within you, I hope you give yourself space and permission to feel it, because grief is love, as we said, with nowhere to go. But with support, with care, with people like Julie, they help us get through the toughest times of our life. And Julie, can you let our listeners know how to reach you?
Yes. Authenticmatters.net is my website. That's probably the most effective. I'm not the most out there on social media, but I do post my haiku almost daily on Instagram, and that's at julie.blitzer. You can friend me on Facebook, and I write an occasional blog, and often in the self-development genre. I'm there.
I love that. Well, this is SOS Stories of Survivors, where survival sparks the soul. And thank you so much for being here today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.